It's a champion changes only patch as we've got buffs to the likes of Aurelia, Kindred, and Gangplank, while Twisted Fate, Vi, and Ryze are on the nerf list. So we'll be breaking everything down and providing you guys with an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role as we head into 25.13. And let's be honest, picking the best champions is fun, but is that really enough on its own? I don't know about you, but locking in Jinx just because she's OP tier doesn't really help if you're lacking sufficient knowledge as an ADC. However, you can begin stomping your way out of low elo when using our brand new Bronze to Diamond course that goes hard in teaching you everything you need to know to succeed as an ADC, which will have you speedrunning any game below Diamond, using the tactics our multi-role challenger player Hector has used to climb to the apex of the ranked ladder. And that's just for ADC. Your mid lane OP tier Twisted Fate pick becomes actually unstoppable when you know all the essentials of mid lane thanks to the new 6-part mid lane series over on our platform that our top 10 challenger player Strompist has tirelessly worked on exclusive to our members. Our tier list gets you the right champions, SkillCapped gets you the right skills. And we're so confident it works. If you don't climb 5 divisions while actively using the platform, you literally don't pay a single cent. So why hold yourself back this season and finally get the rank you deserve? And with that being said, let's get into it. So since there's no item or runes changes for 25.13, let's jump right to the top lane adjustments, starting with Gangplank. Gangplank is going to have the mana cost on his Q lowered from 55 scaling to 35 to 50 scaling to 30, while cooldown on R is dropping from 170 scaling to 130 seconds to 160 scaling to 120 seconds. Gangplank honestly hasn't been in that bad of a spot lately, so a buff like this should make him a pretty solid pickup for 25.13. Are the buffs enough to push him into an S tier position though? Most likely not, so we'll be leaving Gangplank in the A tier, but he'll definitely be really close to breaking into S with any additional positive changes in the coming patches. Worth noting for Gangplank's rune setup, if you're going to pick him up for this patch, is that Fleet should now be considered over Grasp. Grasp is still viable on Gangplank, but with the rune nerfed in 25.11, it's led to Fleet outperforming now. In the higher elos, Fleet Page is actually the most popular on Gangplank, so definitely look to try it out this patch. The early game all-in threat of Aurelia will become even better for this patch, as her passive attack speed per stack is going up from 7.5 scaling to 25% to 10 scaling to 25%. There's also a bug fix being issued to Aurelia, with her passive attack speed now updating on level up when it's active. So at max stacks, you will be getting an extra 10% attack speed in the early game, which is equivalent to a dagger worth of attack speed, so 250 gold worth of stats for free. Jax just saw a similar buff last patch, however his attack speed was increased at all levels, not just in the early game. So we can probably expect for this buff to land slightly less impactful than what we saw for Jax, as Jax ended up gaining a little under 1% win rate. Aurelia has actually been in a completely fine spot for top lane recently, so with this buff coming through, it could definitely be enough to move her into S tier, which is where we'll be placing her for now. Yorick will be nerfed for a second patch in a row, and this time it's just a base stat change, with his armor dropping from 39 to 36, so nothing that should result in Yorick dropping significantly in power, so we'll be leaving him in the top lane A tier. So looking at the top lane tier list, since this patch is relatively small, we won't be making any major adjustments to the list. OP tier is going to stay the same, with Set and Kayle being two of the most optimal carries. With Aurelia buffed, she will now be on the same level as a few of the other priority fighters like Aatrox, Renekton, and Jax, so definitely worth considering for 25.13. The Aatrox matchup is one that Aurelia can do pretty well in due to the fact that she can block Aatrox Q damage with her W and dodge out on his Q with her mobility. So with Aatrox being the most played top laner in the game right now, it does provide Aurelia with even more relative power. With Mundo being a pretty high priority top lane champ right now, one of the better answers to him is Gwen. You run Ignite with TP on Gwen and can bully Mundo early on so that he doesn't end up scaling to the point where he's one-shotting everyone late game. We've got quite a few junglers being adjusted for this patch, and first up is going to be Briar. Briar's W attacks can no longer be cancelled, and Riot has stated that this will make her feel much better against targets who are running away. E post-cast time is being changed from scaling off Briar's attack speed to now being at 0.15 seconds. So how much Briar actually gains from these changes is hard to say. Likely not enough to where she suddenly becomes an OP jungler, so we will be leaving her in the jungle S tier. Fiddlesticks has been one of the most underrated junglers for the past few years now, and he's getting buffed for this patch with his WAP ratio going up from 80 to 90%. We don't see the buff being quite enough to propel Fiddle into the jungle OP tier, but he'll be a great S tier pickup for 25.13. Kindred is next on the buff list, with their R cooldown being lowered by 20 seconds at rank 1, 10 seconds at rank 2, and then it will stay the same at max rank. So 20 seconds off at rank 1 will allow for Kindred to play more aggressively more often throughout the early to mid game. With R up, you can be more aggressive with how you posture with Kindred, so a buff like this does give them more windows of opportunity. It's probably more of a high elo skewed buff where players can really take advantage of cooldown timers, but should give Kindred a decent boost at all ranks. What's actually really interesting is that Kindred has already been a 52% win rate jungler in Diamond Elo and above over the past patch, so this buff could make them pick or ban for the elite brackets to play. Kindred is one of those junglers though who we see a massive disparity in performance depending on the rank, as their win rate in Silver last patch was only 47%. A 5% gap between low and high elo is pretty insane, and this does make it harder for us to rate Kindred on the tier list, as wherever we place them, we definitely won't please everyone. That being said, we do cater our placements more so based on how strong the champion is for Diamond and below, and since Kindred only starts to excel a ton above Diamond, we do tend to have them rated lower than what you may see on high elo jungle tier lists. So for now, Kindred will not be moving up the jungle tier list, as we'll be keeping them placed in A. Still a good pick, but just a smidge below that upper tier for the average player. Nidalee is on the buff list for a second patch in a row, and this time it's her Q damage in human form that's getting buffed. So spear damage will be going up at max rank from 300 to 325%, but it's staying the same at short range. So similar to Kindred, Nidalee is one of the few junglers who performs way better in high elo as opposed to low elo, and with a buff like this, she may actually be worth considering if you are Diamond or above, but for Emerald and below, we still think there are going to be easier and more effective junglers that you can play, so we'll be keeping Nidalee in the jungle B tier. Rammus ended up in a pretty weak spot after his 25.12 mini rework, so Riot's got a few buffs lined up for this patch. Health growth is being increased from 94 to 100, and we can see here in the comparison clips that this adds 103 health when you're level 18. W is also being adjusted so that base resists are up at the later ranks. This W buff is a bit odd because W is currently the spell you max out last on Rammus. As we can see in the comparison clips, level 13 Rammus will have the exact same resists if he's maxing Q into E second, as you won't put a second point into W until level 14. So does this mean Rammus now goes back to maxing his W second, or possibly even first? That will be the determining factor as to how impactful this buff actually lands for him, because if W max last remains the way to go, then this buff is rather underwhelming, as you won't even be influenced by it for a good chunk of the game. Overall, we're leaning towards these buffs not actually impacting Rammus very significantly for this patch, so we'll be leaving him in the jungle B tier for now. And then Vi is on the nerf list for yet another patch, and this time it's going to be her passive shield max health ratio dropping from 14 to 12%. Meta build for Vi lately has revolved around a Sundered Sky rush into Black Cleaver second, so Eclipse relative power will go up a bit due to this change, but Eclipse had been performing pretty bad on Vi in recent patches, so a nerf like this probably isn't enough to actually shift priority away from Sundered Sky and onto Eclipse. So all in all, Vi will be in a weaker spot for 25.13 and is going to continue to be placed in the jungle B tier as one of the lower tier junglers. So moving on to the jungle tier list now, we have a couple of changes we'll be making for 25.13, and the first revolves around Trundle getting pushed into the OP tier. Trundle has been low-key one of the best junglers for a while now, ever since he got buffed for 25.7, but it's just recently where he's been gaining in popularity, and even with his rise in play rate, he's continued to overperform, so we're giving him the bump up. If you're a jungler who's Emerald or below right now and you want the easiest route out, then Trundle should be your highest priority pick for 25.13. And then Jax is the other jungler getting an additional push up the tier list, as we had moved him from B into A tier last patch, but now that we've seen him on live servers for a full patch after that buff, it's clear he's also a top tier jungler now. Both Trundle and Jax are very straightforward, powerful, skirmishing junglers, so they're great for solo queue, where winning those early duels can help you snowball extremely hard. We actually have brand new full game commentaries for both Jax and Trundle that have been uploaded to our website, so if you are wanting to pick up either of them, those commentaries are a great resource to help you out. We're always uploading commentaries that are focused on highlighting the best champs and builds in meta, so you'll get constant updates every single patch from our challenger players. For mid lane this patch, we've got two champions being changed, and they're both receiving nerfs. Ryze is going to have his W base damage lowered by 10 at all ranks, and then W mana cost is going up by 10 at rank 1, but going down by 10 at max rank. So a bit of a nerf to the early game strength of Ryze, which will put him back in a relatively weak spot for 25.13, as we're placing him in the B tier. Twisted Fate ended up in the OP tier after his buffs from last patch, so Riot has decided to partially revert the R buff from 25.12. Cooldown is going back up by 10 seconds at all ranks, so this means R cooldown is now only 10 seconds shorter than it was back in 25.11. All in all, we still expect for Twisted Fate to remain as one of the most powerful mids, so we won't be lowering him down the tier list. Majority of TF players aren't even building him optimally right now, so he's actually even more powerful than you'd expect. Rod of Ages continues to be the most bought rush item on Twisted Fate, but since Rod got nerfed and Rocket Belt was buffed, it's now Rocket Belt that has been outperforming over the past 3 patches. Our challenger mid lane Shori has a new commentary up on our website where he's playing this new build on Twisted Fate if you're interested in seeing how the setup plays before trying it yourself. So the mid lane tier list won't be seeing any significant shifts for 25.13 as a result of the patch being rather small. The Twisted Fate and Ryze nerfs aren't going to be enough to warrant a move down the tier list for either of them, so the meta will remain as to where it was in 25.12. This means OP tier will consist of Diana and Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate will remain as one of the best blind pick mids, as you can survive lane against almost anything and then really come online when you hit level 6 and can start roaming with R. Taking Unsealed Spellbook really helps to alleviate some of Twisted Fate's historically more difficult matchups like Fizz and Yasuo, as he can swap Teleport for Exhaust or Barrier to nullify the all-in strength of those champs. Diana is a pretty good pick into most mids as well, only struggling a bit more against Galio and Yasuo, so if you just use your ban on one of them, then it limits the hard counter options the enemy has to play into you. So for ADCs, there's not a single champion being changed for 25.13, so jumping right into the tier list, here's how we've got it shaping out. Last patch, we initially moved Zeri into the OP tier for ADC, but we jumped the gun slightly on that one because as the patch progressed, she leveled out just a small cut below that OP tier level, so we're moving her back into S for this patch. This means we've now got Jinx and Sivir as the 2 OP tier picks, and then there's honestly a bunch of great S and A tier ADCs to choose from right now. Zeri, Aphelios, Smolder, Samira, and Senna have all become much stronger recently due to direct buffs and are so much better than they were at the start of the season. The only ADCs that are in considerably weak spots right now are Ezreal and Kalista. Kalista has reached unplayable territory due to her repeated nerfs, falling below a 46% win rate, so she's the one champ you just have to stay away from if you're serious about climbing. And then taking a look at the support tier list now, it's a similar vibe to ADC with no changes to the tier list for this patch due to not a single support being adjusted. Braum and Nami have been up in the OP tier for quite a while now, so it would honestly be nice to see a bit of a shakeup. Nami is the most played support in the game right now, while also holding an incredibly high win rate, so all metrics point towards her being an OP pick. Braum is the closest thing that you're going to get to a guaranteed win when playing up against other melee comps, as his kit does an incredible job at shutting down melee champs. If the enemy team locks a melee top, jungle, and mid laner, then picking Braum is a no-brainer, as any champ that needs to dive in to be effective gives Braum great value, as it's so easy for him to proc his passive on them. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap everything up for the 25.13 tier list update. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.